Welcome to the Oxford High School School Committee meeting of Monday, September 26, 2022. Regular school committee meetings are videotaped by Oxford Cable Access and broadcast live on the town's public access educational cable channel 194, which is also streamed live on the Town of Oxford website, Cable Access webpage. Video recordings of regular meetings may also be viewed subsequent to the live broadcast via the town's YouTube channel, which may be accessed from either the Town of Oxford website or the Oxford Public School website. Thank you. I do want to call the meeting to order. At this time, I will open the floor for public comment. Comments are limited to topics relating to school business. Speakers must identify themselves by name and address and will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes, although the school committee may hear comments on unanticipated topics. Discussion or action on such topics not specifically listed on the agenda will be postponed until a future meeting date. The floor is open for public comment. Seeing and hearing no public comment, we will close the floor to public comment. Next order of business, our student representative report. Unfortunately, Genevieve Bartlett, our student rep, could not make it tonight, so we will move to the next part of the agenda. Special presentations, the Director of Student Services and Special Education. I will take it just a tad bit out of order. We will start with B. So the Futures Education, this is a presentation of special education analysis. I'll turn it over to Director Miller.
So I just want to introduce our presenters before they step up to the table. We have John McGuire, we have Richard Labrie, and we have Michael Nyman from Futures, and they did our educational analysis, and they're here to give us our summary tonight.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Miller. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for coming to Oxford. Look forward to hearing your report.
Good evening.
Evening.
Good evening.
So if we could advance the, are we advancing from here or?
Yep, the keyboard to the left of your keyboard.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So we appreciate this opportunity to provide an overview of our reports. So the primary purpose of this presentation to the committee are to review the methodology of the study. We're going to talk a little bit about how we arrived at the results. Present pertinent information for contextual purposes. So we're going to talk in the course of our presentation things like MTSS or RTI, culture of ownership. So in addition to providing the results, we're going to provide some contextual framework as well that we think will be helpful for the school committee. Provide key findings, provide corresponding areas of opportunity or recommendations, and provide a forum for discussion. We'll defer to the school committee and the school chair if there's something that you would choose to do. We do have a slide at the very end for discussion, but again, if it is helpful for the committee, we would welcome questions throughout. If there are any clarifying questions or anything at all that you'd like to bring up, we're happy to answer throughout the course. So when we engaged with the review, with the leadership, there were 6 primary areas that we agreed to that were particular import to leadership. And also, these are issues that we see through our work all the way from Maine to California. All districts are struggling with special ed, whether it's staffing, behaviors. These are not new to us, so we feel very comfortable looking at these areas. They include related services such as speech, PT, psychology. Again, those related services that are related to the IEP that exist to support the student's educational program. Utilization of paraprofessional supports to look not just at the numbers, and certainly we have a lot of benchmarking data, but how are paraprofessionals utilized? Do they have the capacity? Are they assigned in a way that meets the needs of students? We know how important paraeducators are for any service delivery, so we really want to be very intentional about how we look at that. Out-of-district placements, we really could combine 3 and 4 together. When you think of the continuum of services for students with disabilities, by law, out-of-district placements exist as part of that. So the continuum of services for students who are struggling, we kind of embedded out-of-district placements as part of that. We'll report that tonight. Our Continuum of Services looked at not just students with disabilities, with IEPs, but students who are struggling, students that might not need IEPs, but need to have their needs addressed in some way by the school district, whether it's through RTI, Response Intervention, or MTSS. The state's going through a change, new rebranding of early intervention, that there are different ways to support struggling learners. When Mr. McGuire and I started this work, this many years ago, about 12 years, we strictly looked at special education, but we realized that we're missing a piece, and that was RTI or MTSS, because so much of the time RTI or MTSS is interconnected with special education, because if MTSS or RTI doesn't work, students might be referred for an IEP. So we think that RTI and MTSS is a very important parameter to look at, and we were so pleased to know that the district has really been very thoughtful and intentional in their MTSS. So when a lot of the things that we're reporting on, just due to leadership's kind of understanding and their vision, these weren't necessarily new findings for them, but I think they were more confirmatory. Organizational structure and district coordination of programs and services. So we looked at things like professional development, the organizational structure and special education, pupil services, how they interfaced with district leadership at the local level. In our view, special ed works best when it's a support to schools, that principals, school-based staff have the capacity to meet the needs of students. And special education at the district level exists as a support. They necessarily shouldn't be the first call, but they should be supportive. And we're going to talk about that tonight as well. And then number 6 is Mr. LeBree's bailiwick, finances pertaining to Medicaid and transportation. That's the second part of the presentation. So we have a program component and we have a financial component. They are somewhat interrelated, but just for tonight's purposes, we're going to present them as separate entities. So again, tonight is sort of a summary of the forthcoming reports. We just have a couple more things to address in the reports to finalize them. Once you see them, you'll see that it really follows this format of tonight's meeting, where we're going to talk about organizational considerations and then continuum supports on the program side. And then Mr. LeBrie is going to talk about the finance reports, which actually we present as separate documents because they really do address two very different types of data. Each will be considered when we discuss, well, again, we'll talk about findings and everybody's opportunity. And again, Mr. LeBrie will talk about the transportation and finance as part of the last section. So I talked about one of the purposes tonight was to talk about the methodology. So how did we arrive at these results? We really triangulated qualitative information and quantitative information. We talked to 45 stakeholders within the district. We went to all the schools. We talked to people in general ed, special ed. We talked to certified teachers, instructional assistants or paraprofessionals. We talked to the specialist, speech, OT, PT, psychology. We talked to school leadership. So that number feels really good to us. For a relatively small district, 45 feels like a really nice number of perspectives. And we know that Mr. Lucas and district leadership were very invested to have us talk to as many people as possible. So that, again, to us, that feels like a very nice number in terms of the number of people we got to talk to. The questions were catered to the people's area of expertise, even though there was some overlap. A theme that is recurrent in our report and in the interviews that Mr. McGuire is going to talk about in a second is culture of ownership. What do we mean by that? We mean that students with disabilities in a school aren't those students down the hallway. They're our kids. Special ed should be a service, not a place to students. There shouldn't be a silo. So a question we asked of everybody, whether it was a paraprofessional, school leadership, principal, we said, are students in your school part of the fabric, part of the school community? And again, that was important to us, so everyone heard and was able to offer their opinion. That said, the questions that I would ask an SLP, I'm an SLP by trade, so those were the folks on my roster. The questions I asked them about tests they use, how they view literacy and language, those are obviously very specific things that we wouldn't ask everybody. Just like the questions that Mr. McGuire asked of special ed teachers at his schools would be different from the questions that we would ask other disciplines. So we had overlapping themes, but then we also had very specific questions we asked to get that perspective. There's a lot of data you'll see when you get the reports in the next week or so it's a very data-rich process, both on the program side and Mr. Libere's side. So we looked at comparative data, looking at other Worcester County school districts of similar size, what we call analogous Worcester school county districts. That's a mouthful. I'll just refer to it as county school districts in the report. But we want to, again, because county school districts, in our view, are the best metric for comparison. You have the same sort of the cost of living, the same pressures and challenges within a county, and also the same access to schools and colleges for graduating teachers. So in our view, the most valid metric is to look at county school districts for these things like student achievement, staffing, and those types of things. So you'll see a lot of comparisons to other Worcester County school districts throughout the report and throughout the presentation. And then document reviews, we looked at things like organizational structure, IEPs. We did spent a lot of time on the DESE website looking at longitudinal data, student outcome data, IEP data, graduation rates, achievement gaps in both ELA and math, which we'll talk about. So again, there's a triangulation looking at things at the local level that are specific to Oxford, but also getting that global context. So I will kick it over to Mr. McGuire. The first part is culture and climate.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the opportunity to be here, and particularly for the honor of partnering with the school district to conduct this important initiative on your behalf of your students. We're going to give you some of the highlights here of findings and what we refer to as opportunities for the district to consider in terms of building on the solid foundation that you've established here in Oxford. With respect to culture, we start with culture because everything in a school system happens in a people context, and it's that climate and culture that sets the tone and enables the progress and the achievement of ambitious goals for our students. With respect to the culture of ownership, the degree to which students with disabilities are viewed by all of the adults in the system as their students, that was seen as variable across the interviewees with whom we dealt. And it was universally perceived that there was a higher level of ownership among educators who had had the opportunity to work with students with disabilities and or collaborate with special education colleagues. And for your awareness, that is very consistent with our experience across more than 300 districts nationally with whom we have worked. Encouragingly, your students with disabilities were spending more time in general education settings, least restrictive environments, if you will, with non-disabled peers than other districts across Worcester County. That's, yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just want to add a little bit to that. That's a real celebration, that idea of inclusionary education, that students with disabilities are spending more time compared to other students in other Worcester County school districts in gen ed. That's a wonderful foundation. One of the things we're going to be talking about is what's the quality of that? What does co-teaching look like? Sometimes students might be in gen ed, but it might not be optimizing the instruction. So I just want to make that point, that that's wonderful to see as a quantitative data point, but we feel that there's something to build upon that in terms of the nature of co-teaching, where we have a special ed teacher and a gen ed teacher working hand in hand to support those students.
Relatedly, that was consistent with our experience in all 4 schools, that your staff come to work every day wanting to serve students, all students, and to serve them in the least restrictive environment. They bend every effort to do that, and they bend every effort to keep students within the district rather than necessarily send them out for special education programming. Some areas of opportunity related to culture and climate. You may want to consider the development of professional learning communities at your schools involving both specialists and generalists together with common goals and activities. Creating a mission statement that explicitly contains elements of both general and special education, and we can provide technical assistance with that. If contractual parameters allow, we would recommend considering expanding the teacher appraisal process to include factors relative to ownership for all students, and as new teachers are recruited and retained by the district, to incorporate those values, the value of all students served by all staff, as a part of the recruitment notices, the interview process, and the intake of those teachers that you bring into the district. With respect to staff support, our findings were that the configuration of your office support, your organizational structure for administration and leadership of the program is logical and rational for a district of your size, and according to interviewees, it was universally reported as working well. Interviewees acknowledged that the district is providing sufficient, adequate materials for instruction and learning, including not only books and traditional materials, but also technologies and so forth. It was acknowledged with appreciation by the respondents that the district's supportive of professional development. And in the next breath, they said, and we want more. That we see this in the districts that we work with, even with the most elaborate professional development programs, that hunger for continuous learning on the part of your faculty and staff, in particularly current and emerging high priority areas, like instructional strategies for classroom teachers at Tier 1 for struggling students, like working with students who have particular social emotional needs, and particularly also relevant offerings for paraprofessional staff. This is not unique to our experience. It's actually a very good place for your staff to be. They're hungry to learn everything they can on best practices to best serve your students. An area of opportunity, maximizing your district professional development resources in a unified program serving both generalists and specialists. The IEP process. The processes and procedures of your IEP team were reported to be uniform and consistent. That's another celebration, to use Michael's word. That's not always the case, and this was universally and consistently reported. Reductions and discontinuations of services were described as primarily celebratory in nature. Let me just share a little bit about that. We ask, what is the climate around the table at the IEP team meetings, excuse me, when there are recommendations to reduce or discontinue a service because the student has been successful and no longer needs it? We have had some partner districts where that was a source of contention. It was perceived that something was being taken away from the student and a source of angst. In your district, that's not the case. Primarily, these are celebratory events, and that is a barometer of the excellence with which your staff build relationships of trust with parents. Parents are the ones who are usually anxious because they're afraid we're taking something away that's enabling success. Your folks have done a very good job where this is a celebration, as it should be. Some areas of opportunity, and I want to note that a number of these things, while we're reporting them, are things that your district is not only aware of, but already working on. And that's a nice place to be. Updating and disseminating your program descriptions for all stakeholders, already occurring. Consider upgrading the IEP process by upgrading the software for accessibility and creating an additional layer of goal oversight to ensure quality IEPs. It's very common for us to suggest that districts engage in annual IEP development training for staff because first of all, you have attrition of staff, and also the expectations and requirements of IEPs seem to be updated and changing on a regular basis as well. Michael, staffing?
Sure. So this next slide really is corresponds to what you're going to see in a couple slides when we talk about what is the basically the district's contribution to special ed as a percentage of their overall operating budget. And again, that's correlated with staffing because we know that staffing is really 85% of a line item based on salaries, and we know benefits. So we looked at how does Oxford compare to other counties in terms of teachers and instructional staff. And you can see, you'll see in the report, ARI stands for Availability Ratio Index, just a way of saying basically the ratio of staff to students with disabilities. It's a way for us to benchmark and provide an apples to apples comparison. So the first two, teachers and instructional assistants, We went to the DESE website. Again, DESE tends to be about a year or two behind the times. So we're really taking Oxford's current data, and as best we can, trying to compare it to the other districts based on 2021 or 2020. But it really gives us at least a good sense of where the district compares with other districts in terms of their staffing. So we can see that the lower the ARI compared to the comparison, the more generally staffed something is. Because again, that number suggests a lower overall ratio. So teachers, it's generally staffed. It's not terribly generally staffed. You'll see there's great variation. And I think COVID had a lot to do with this because of the staffing shortages. We had some that we couldn't report in Worcester that had ratios like 50-1. And we think that must have been an outlier based on just not being able to have special ed teachers. We know there's a nationwide shortage. I subscribe to special ed staffing because I'm interested in what the industry is. There's tens of thousands of openings in special ed right now. It's a very, very leanly staffed and hard to find discipline. I know John in his work in New York has found that to be definitely the case. So again, we want to be cautious about that number, but really we can just present it really just as a fact right now. Neither to be celebrated nor not celebrated. The fact that it's generally staffed, in our view, again, provides, however, some opportunities when we get to co-teaching, that there might be ways with, and we talk about in the report with the central schedule or the master schedule, ways to make what we have right now in terms of, or what the district has, to make the special ed efficiencies such that they can even spend more time in the classroom with students, both with and without disabilities. So again, you can see other parameters, instructional assistants, it's leanly staffed. The last four, they're not reported statewide, interestingly enough. We have teachers and we have paras, but we don't have SLPs, we don't have OTs, school psychologists, BCBAs, PTs. That tends to be not reported in our work, and luckily we've done enough work in Massachusetts to be able to benchmark that. So when you see the source, it really is statewide. That's our database, and we know that there's some leanly staffed positions, including SLP and psychology. And again, as Mr. McGuire said, this feels like a rear view driving to us in a way, because when we got here, district leadership was already aware of these things. They're already looking to fill a psychology position because it's really half-staffed. So again, we're reporting, but we knew that it was not news to district leadership, and we know that some very positive things are happening across many of these parameters. So I'll just move on and talk about some of these areas of opportunity as is currently occurring, because we know that Kristen, Mr. Lucas, Tara have already, as a team, been very thoughtful about all these things that we're talking about. So revisiting entry and exit guidelines, related services, and paraeducator supports that was already starting when we got here. So that's why we want to say is currently occurring, because it's not our bright idea. We thought it was a great idea, but already happening. Explore alternate service models that will maximize efficiencies. In Massachusetts, for those of you who are aware of IEPs, there's A-Grid, B-Grid, and C-Grid. And basically, B-Grid are special ed services that take place within the general education environment. A-Grid are consult services where basically the specialists provide support for teachers so they can support students. A lot of times this just requires a paradigm shift, and this is actually a very effective way to support students. So it's sort of moving in that direction that the district is already in. And I'd mentioned the master schedule. There's ways to work with school-based principals, homogeneous groupings at times where students with like disabilities can be together. Also, MTSS can be part of that. So again, we know that it's not as simple as that, because there might be some logistical or contractual or regulatory considerations in any district, but all things being equal, having a very effective and efficient master schedule opens up a whole bunch of instructional opportunities. And I'd mentioned before about looking at the financial allocations compared to school districts. You can see what the allocation is for allocations. So historically, the district has devoted more financial resources expressed as a percentage of the overall operating budget, and that's what you see there, and you'll see in the report. So it's been higher in some ways, as you can see. There's Oxford, so it's been higher than the state, but lower than the county. Again, we think that county is a better metric to measure. So that rounds out the first part of the program review, which is the organizational considerations, culture and climate, professional learning, the central office and its relationship to the schools, and financial allocations of special ed as part of the operating budget. So we'll move on now to the programmatic considerations, which really looks at the way students with learning needs are being served.
So I'm going to share with you some information about your response to intervention program district-wide. Respondents indicated to us that it was perceived as a work in progress, which I would add puts you in league with about 99% of the districts in the country. RTI is an ever-evolving initiative in virtually every district that we've partnered with across the country. It is perceived as more effective in your district at this point in its initiation in the areas of literacy and numeracy than it is at this point in terms of behavioral supports. Again, very similar to the vast majority of districts. There's a variety of intervening supports available across, which are further detailed in the full report, but you have done put forth significant effort actually, for example, to enhance staffing in areas such as reading specialists, math specialists, and so forth. From a quantitative perspective, your student with disability population, while it increased just over 3% in the last 5 years, is still essentially in line with the overall population and the constellation of low needs disabilities. In other words, at the time of our review, you were not over-identifying students with high incidence, low needs, struggling students, for example, which is usually an indicator of the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of your response to intervention system. So at this point, that was encouraging. And historically, there has not been disproportionality in your identification of students, for example, minority students, which is another area of celebration. Some areas of opportunity. The district leadership at the time of our visits had already instituted an array of changes, including engaging DESE support, realigning the interventionists with respect to numbers and areas of responsibility. In other words, maximizing the benefit of those investments and those staff members that you've recruited. Systematizing your MTSS and your district curriculum accommodation plan. We also commend district leadership for creating a framework for reporting structure for behavioral supports that currently exist, similar to those that currently exist in literacy and numeracy, which from our experience puts you a bit ahead of many other districts. Some areas of opportunity include rolling up data across school and grades by content area. Some models are referred to as data walls to ensure that there's an ongoing awareness of every student at all times, and particularly highlighting any student who may be struggling so that interventions can prevent the need for a referral to special education, for example. Implementing a reverse RTI model. This is a best practice that we encountered a few years back in working with a partner district in the Midwest, and we have encouraged our other partner districts to anticipate it as you further evolve in the areas of response to intervention. Recognize that it is not only an effective upfront system to prevent referrals to the committee for special education, but also it can be an effective safety net for students who are being declassified from special education to ensure that the monitoring is there, there's no regression, that we're constantly maintaining awareness. And I would also note, as a former chairperson of IEP teams, it's very reassuring to anxious parents. We're all celebrating the idea that the student no longer needs special ed, but there's this little red flag in the back of a parent's mind saying, what if we're taking the very support that's enabling my son or daughter's success? This gives them a reassurance that we're not abandoning your child. We're on top of it, we're monitoring. The creation of operational guidelines regarding effective classroom supports and what constitute behaviors that require interventions, a behavioral checklist, if you will. Your in-district continuum of services, our findings were that you do have a variety of programs in place to support students with disabilities, and that there are ways to further enhance that, and we'll talk about those. Your student with disability achievement in ELA and graduation rates are areas for further attention, and we want to add very clearly that district leadership was well aware of that prior to our arrival and already undertaking steps to address that. Some areas of opportunity. Consider establishing vertical articulation teams, and let me just give you a little bit of background about that. The transitions from primary to intermediate, from intermediate to middle, and from middle to high school are always a big deal for every student and their parents, particularly at the younger ages. And we encourage that for students with disabilities, they are also particularly important stepping stones, if you will. We encourage that those transition teams or vertical articulation teams from the sending environment and from the receiving environment come together in structured ways each year. And remember, each year you're dealing with new students at each level and new parents who haven't experienced those transitions to maximize the transfer of information about each individual student, particularly students with disabilities who have an array of supports. Bolster the integrated co-teaching model with instructional and administrative enhancements, everything from co-planning time to schedules that enable the two partners to come together effectively for both identified and non-identified students in integrated co-taught classes. Continue to focus on alternative pathways for students to optimize graduation rates. Career and technical education options, for example, just briefly. Continue to focus on systems to improve goal writing around those IEPs. And we emphasize continue because the district is already working on that. Your out-of-district placements are a cause for celebration. You had 7% of your identified students placed outside the district, which is lower than county districts here in Worcester County. It's also lower than most of the districts with which we have partnered. That's testimony to the fact that your staff bend every effort not to have to send your students out of the district, and that the students placed out of district have legitimate need for the intense services provided in those programs. Some areas of opportunity. Continue to focus, emphasis on continue, you already do this, on requisite personnel, programmatic, and physical plant capacities to serve students within the district. We call it a bring back and keep in model. Always monitoring that cohort of students who are out with an eye toward how can we build the capacity internally to serve them in their home schools. Consider a point person with a behavioral background to manage out-of-district placements of students with disabilities, and that correlates well with the reality that, particularly at the secondary level, many of the students who ultimately are placed out of district evidence behavioral needs. We're hoping that our efforts in conducting this analysis are supportive of the district's leadership in providing services to students. I would note that when you think about it, the kinds of leaders who invite in a third party, be it us or others, and say, we're going to open the doors, look at everything, tell us how we're doing, tell us where we can do better, are leaders with vision and commitment to continuous improvement of student achievement. In summary, update or develop clearly articulated program descriptions and create eligibility and exit guidelines that are consistently applied not only for your special ed instructional programs, but also for related services and for paraprofessional supports. It's not a one-way street. We always emphasize you want to have not only eligibility guidelines, but exit guidelines. The goal is always student independence. Develop and implement a district strategy to achieve a pervasive culture of ownership, and that goes to such issues as your recruitment and retention processes and so forth. Continue efforts to ensure professional development relevancy for faculty and paraprofessional staff on current and emerging topics. Clarify expectations and processes for staff around the IEP team meetings, and develop building-based capacity to support Cpac, your special ed parent group.
Yeah, and if I could just elaborate a little bit on that last one. So we talk about, in our view, the strong special ed programs are ones that are led by the schools, that the principals, the assistant principals, the school leaders at the school take ownership for students, and they've got they have a vision. And the support would come from central office as needed. But really, parents see the school, rightfully so, as their go-to place. That's where their students are going to. They don't necessarily see central office as the clearinghouse for support. So that's sort of like Cpac, any kind of special ed parent advisory group, in our view, if it's led by schools and sort of symbolically and operationally led by school principals, parents see the school as the special ed resource and not central office. It's not to say central office doesn't have a place to bring guest speakers to be part of that, but in our view, when Cpac is viewed as a school-based initiative and not a central office initiative, it just makes it that much stronger. I apologize, in the packet you have a duplicate slide. This is really what you just saw, so my apologies.
And the last part of the presentation is programmatic considerations that include reviewing your continuum of services with an eye toward integrated co-teaching and the various aspects and supports that enable it. In our experience, integrated co-teaching is incredibly effective for not only identified students, but non-identified students in co-taught classrooms, if done well. And it's more than just pairing up two good teachers and saying, go forth and be productive. They really will just blossom with appropriate professional development, sufficient common planning time, and an array of other supports. And then revisit methods to increase student graduation rates, career tech ed and so forth. And that concludes that program piece. And I turn to Mr. Labrie.
John, if I could maybe ask, before we move on to the finance side, this might seem like a good time for the school committee again, if
Yep.
there's something you want to do. Have any questions of
Any
the program
questions?
review?
Any questions from any members? Mr. Burke?
Just a couple of quick ones. One question just on the methodologies. Is there a reason that parents and caregivers aren't interviewed or given a say in this process? We talk about their experience, especially you mentioned, and I love that we as a staff find that reductions and discontinuations of services are to be celebrated. I hope parents feel the same way. So I'm wondering if they're ever made a part of that process.
While we did not interview parents in this particular analysis, we do ask in those conversations, when we have that particular question around the table, are any of the stakeholders anxious or resistive, particularly, to the reductions or discontinuations? And specifically, we will hear if parents may be a little nervous or maybe there's real resistance. In your district, we heard that parents, while they may be a little anxious about it, there were no surprises. Nobody gets surprised at the table. They have led up to this from day one by indicating special education interventions, whether they're instructional, related service, paraprofessionals, are intended by design to be temporary.
Yep.
And have worked with your parents building two-way communication and relationships of trust, so that while any parent may naturally be a little anxious about it, apparently your staff have done a great job about reassuring and educating them about the nature of this, and that it is not a one-way street. If your child regresses, we're here and ready to intervene and support.
Yeah.
So, yes.
It's great, and I love that paired with the idea of the reverse RTI. I think that's a great a great thought. My only other question was, under your culture and climate areas of opportunity, you stated if contractual parameters allow, expand the teacher evaluation process to include the ownership issue. Can you talk a little bit about what that would look like?
Yes, actually, and the contractual parameters are a reality for all of us, as you know.
Yeah.
As a former superintendent who sat on negotiating teams, I guarantee it. So, building into the teacher appraisal process, variables, measures that will tell us that teachers are engaged in observable behaviors that would indicate their ownership for all students.
Okay.
You know, they don't need to be arduous. It's really a matter of conveying in a district mission and vision statement or belief statement, beliefs and values. All students can learn, and we're all on board to do that more eloquently than I just did it. But then, how do we bring that into practice? How do we have these lovely, eloquent mission statements. Are we sure that our practice is consistent with those mission statements? And I think as you go to the recruitment and retention processes and your professional development processes, reinforcing that from day one, that if you accept this position as an elementary teacher, for example, please understand that it will be an expectation upon you, maybe not year one, but at some point in your work with us, you will be working with diverse students with special needs and collaborating and providing their services with special education colleagues. If that for some reason is philosophically repugnant to you, this probably isn't the place for you. We engage in best practice. This is best practice. It's very effective, and people come on board quite readily. We have had the opportunity to provide technical assistance in large systems, putting integrated co-teaching in place, the collaboration of specialists and generalists. And any resistance that we've encountered has really not been a resistance because I don't want to work with those children. It's been because I'm afraid I don't know how.
Sure.
So when you empower people with professional development and the collaborative support of colleagues with backgrounds of experience in the area, it goes extremely well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Bill?
Kind of a follow-up. Isn't that already part of the state's educational evaluative model? I mean, it's a requirement that we educate all students. It's already there, so I don't think it has to be negotiated. It just has to be upheld by our
It is
administration.
required that we educate all students,
Right.
the free appropriate public education from the federal law right on
Right.
down to state and local. But it is not required that every person under law work with every student that I'm aware of. You
I do-
can't discriminate against students because of disability. But again, in terms of if I was employed as a general educator in a discipline, I'm a science teacher at the high school, whatever. It may be new to my practice as an expectation that I collaborate with a special ed colleague. That may be a significant change. I would hope that, you know, under the banner of best practice, that we all come to it enthusiastically. But, you know, when you start to say, and that's going to be a part of your formal evaluation, that's a change that you're going to want to work carefully with.
So for this district, is that new? Is that what you're saying, that this is?
I don't know your contract.
No, I mean, do we have, I guess, I'd be surprised to learn, like, do our teachers not already work with our special ed teachers? Isn't that?
There's a good deal of collaboration going on in your district. I'm not sure that all teachers have had the experience of collaborating.
Yeah, but with the evaluation tool, everything's evaluative anyways, and to Pal's point, like, that's part of the job description, and I understand what you're saying. It's gotta be part of the vision, and the leadership team has to be, you know, talking about and educating and providing professional development.
Right.
Because you're right, you don't want to blindside, but I don't think it has anything to do with contracts, to Pal's point. I mean, anything in that ed eval tool, and again, the ed eval tool, for me as a principal, and I know out here, it's not an I gotcha, it's a tool to improve teaching and learning.
Right.
So, but to your point, I think transparency, I think, is probably something we want to be transparent. Here's what we're looking for, here's
Would
going to be
agree.
a focal area in the evaluation, that type of thing. But to Pal's point, like, all students are.
I was just surprised. I thought data and goals were something that the teacher would drive in conjunction with the special educator, that they were working with, because they're the ones that are really evaluating the students.
We would
So
agree.
to hear that.
Yeah, but
That's-
to what they're trying to say too, though, I, you know, where I am currently, when I first got there, it was, I don't, you know, those are those students. It's changing culture, it's changing mindset. I mean, I think we're well on our way here, if
You
not
are.
beyond, where a lot of places, but I understand what you're saying.
And I'm not saying it's not happening, what we're saying is there are ways to operationalize with the state to further codify that at the district
Right.
level, to make those expectations even clearer.
Right.
And to be very clear, I can't recall off the top of my head any district that we've worked with that had a truly 100% pervasive culture of ownership. When you think about it, all these years later, we are still overcoming our initial efforts at providing public education for students with disabilities. We built special education within the system as a separate entity. It was our best thinking at the time. It was well intended. Prior to that, we'd actually excluded students from public schools. So we created special education, and the message, not intended, to general education teachers was, we know something in special ed that you don't. And they believed us, okay? Then we turned around as we learned and grew in our knowledge base and spoke about inclusion. And very good people, very child-centered people said, I'm not a special education teacher. I don't know what you people know. We're still working as collaboratively as possible to overcome what the vestiges of that fear, of that thinking that I don't know how to teach a student with a disability. Well, nobody should have to teach in isolation under challenging circumstances, in our opinion. The collective knowledge is sufficient probably to meet the needs of any student who presents. But we're still, like it or not, working to overcome some of those old fears that we created unintentionally.
Right, the SEI endorsement certainly helps teachers too, to put more tools in their toolbox.
Right.
I just had a question about the staffing piece. So when you took into, particularly with the teachers, you took into account, did you take into account the ESSER positions that we currently have, which will be currently, be going away? So when we talk about the fact that we're generously staffed, did you encompass all positions, including the ESSER positions, because those aren't sustainable?
The FTEs, the ones that you see, were certified special education teachers within the district. We didn't distinguish between where they might be in the classrooms.
Okay.
Just that we took more.
So the teachers and the number there is just special ed teachers
Correct.
across it, okay.
Yes.
Could I just add something
Yeah.
to that? I think it's important to, as we present data like that, to just remind everybody who may be watching that it's data and it's accurate, but it's data. It doesn't make judgments. It doesn't celebrate and it doesn't criticize. The bottom line question is whether you appear to be somewhat generously staffed or leanly staffed or right where we would have anticipated. The bottom line question is it working for you and your students?
Right.
If, if it is, great. If it's not quite where you want it, are there ways that we can reconfigure to maximize the benefit of existing staff for students?
Right.
And it raises good, healthy questions of reflective practice.
Yes, Val?
So it's interesting to see like how many students, I guess, are not referred out of district. But yet we have a lot of data that shows that families are choosing to leave our district. And so at different grade levels, at different times, through different transitions, through the elementary school into the middle school or from the middle school into the high school. And one thing that I've always wondered is who are those students that are leaving? Are those students that are unidentified students with disabilities? Are they students that have been struggling and their needs are going to be met elsewhere because parents are taking the initiative to, take things into their hands to make sure that their kids get what they need? I think it's good that we're servicing our kids and doing everything that we can, but yet, like you said, it's data. We have certain data, but the
Right.
data doesn't always tell us the full picture.
Right.
And I don't really know, because I don't work in this district, but I don't know, are there building-based teams? How often do they meet? I know that our teachers don't have common planning time like other districts do. So I think that they must be struggling to meet to discuss student needs. they must be struggling at times to have opportunities to identify and do, MTSS or whatever and discuss that data. So what would you tell us we would need to advocate for at this level right now so we can fix that?
Well, most immediately, and Jen, I'll let you kind
Okay.
of give your thinking. But the thing that jumps to my mind is going back to the semester schedule. So again, we don't mean to presume, because there are, maybe perhaps, classroom size limits, logistics on, but let's just say all things being equal, if I'm a special ed teacher in second grade and John's a gen ed John's one of 3 section gen ed teachers, and I've got students in all 3 grades, that's hard for me as a special ed teacher to meet all the needs in an inclusionary practice. So let's just say, again, I'm not presuming, although let's say it's something that the district wants to pursue with homogeneous grouping, that we have students with disabilities with a gen ed teacher that absolutely, is stepping forward, wants to do that, wants to be part of a co-teaching dyad. Then we've got that one special ed teacher not going to 3 sections, but going to 1 section. So again, to me, it's more of an operational logistical question or solution most immediately. That's not all there is to it. There's so much
Right.
more, like training and, co-teaching takes a lot of practice. John was in Texas for 3 years, right, with his co-teaching dyads, and it's a long, long process. But that's the thing that comes, if you're asking for solutions right away, again, I think scheduling has a lot to do with it.
That Texas study was an interesting one. We were there 3 years. We put, at the district's request, integrated co-teaching in 30 schools of a 30,000 student district. We did it in 10 school cohorts, first year, second year, third year. And it was a wonderful study of change in a large organization. I'd like to go to your questions about the questions you raise about parents who opt to go elsewhere at
Yeah.
different points in time was not a part of the scope of this particular study, but I'm dying to know. Now
I
that
am
you
too.
raised it, I really want to know.
Yeah.
Because the answers to the questions you raise and related questions may have implications for the district in terms of, we had no idea. We've got a group of parents who are leaving because either their students are challenged in ways they don't feel we can adequately address, or they want their students challenged in ways they don't feel we are currently doing.
Right.
Either way, there's so many variables at work there, but it would be, at the very least, interesting and probably help inform practice.
Yeah, it'd be wonderful to figure what that is, because that, I think, has been something that we've all been trying to figure out for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, I think the instructional piece is part of it, but there's a lot of other factors. Reputation of a high school. Different offerings from athletics to, there's just a whole spectrum of different issues. But yeah, to figure out what's driving it, I don't think there's one thing driving, I think there's multiple things driving
I expect you're
it.
right about that, but it
Yeah.
would be fun to find out.
Right, and those are things that we've been, I think we've been trying to develop a way when people do exit out, trying to get some information. I think that's the time you get it. Ask, hey, do you mind filling out an exit interview or some reasons why, or this quick survey as to what the reasons you're leaving? That's where we can get that data from.
In one of my districts,
Sure.
we were so proud of ourselves. It was a very high-performing district in the capital region of New York. And we were very proud of ourselves, and rightly so. We had high-achieving students. We placed them in the best schools in the country. And at one point, it occurred to us that while we were so proud of that graduation rate and the placement in top-notch schools, we never asked the question about, do they persevere? Do they succeed? And so we instituted a 4-year-out follow-up survey with our students, and it was an eye-opener for us. And it helped us identify some skill sets that we were missing for our students so that they would continue to succeed. The vast majority of them were succeeding, but an unacceptable number were not. And I'd just like to take this moment to make an observation, which is the fact that your district administration and you as a school committee raise these kinds of questions is just, it bodes so well for your district and for your students. It really does. I applaud you for this.
Thank you.
Before I move off co-teaching, I just mentioned one thing I think was really important, Joe, with your work in Texas, was that it was the co-teaching dyads, but the administrators were the third partner in all those teams. What to look for, the 5-minute walkthrough. I'm not sure if people are familiar with Marilyn French. She's sort of the guru of co-teaching practice. But so much of the recommendations had to do with the administrator supporting those co-teaching dyads, not from a punitive or an evaluative perspective, but from a supportive perspective. So it's really 3 legs of the stool: the gen ed teacher, special ed teacher, in the school administrator.
In regards to the co-teaching model, I know that the state does put restrictions on how many students can be in a class that are receiving services.
Right.
So, I mean, this isn't for us really to decide. This is more the administrative team and all these discussions I know you guys are having, because you've been working your tails off. I've been hearing good stuff about it. But I wonder, I imagine you guys are gonna come back and tell us more if that's feasible and like what we need to advocate for, because ultimately, hearing this great stuff, all this work that is happening, I'm just waiting for my marching orders so we can go and we can work on the budget. That's basically what our function is. And I'm wondering, are they coming with another follow-up meeting from you folks to tell us, ideally, this is the best model that we see for this district? Or is this,
We are not going to lose anyone's number here.
okay,
We have what we think are resources that are available to leadership that we hope will be helpful. So, and as part of this, not be an extra cost to the district. This is just part of the ongoing partnership. We feel that we do have some resources that either we have or could provide to district leadership as part of this plan. And again, but we don't want to be presumptuous, because we know that you've got to also kind of process everything that we've produced.
We want to be very conservative about spending your money.
yes, and I appreciate that, but at the same time, I feel like we've been waiting for you for a long time, and we now have great people that are making all this happen. And
Yes.
it's one of those best practices that's encouraged by the state for every district to do it. I mean, it's a requirement, I think, every so many years that you have some independent come in, independent analysis of your special ed department. So I'm excited that we're undertaking this, but again, I'm eager to know, again, like, you know, I hear transitions between buildings, having those models. I guess I wonder, how long is it gonna take to hear that these action steps are being put in place?
Yeah.
I don't know, and,
And we do think that once you get the full report, you're going to see much more detail than we presented
Okay.
today. We really do have much more in-depth recommendations, sort of, guideposts for the district.
Thank you. All right, well,
Speaking
the
of money.
financial piece.
yeah, money, here it comes.
Thank you. The first slide is basically details your Medicaid revenue over the last 5 years. And if I could just call your attention to the second line, direct services, $24,694 in 21-22. Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind for a few minutes. You'll see that you get most of your money through the admin claiming and the cost settlement process. It's basically a three-part process: direct service, cost settlement, and admin claiming. And the next slide shows you relatively the amount over those 5 years. And district management should be commended. They received 64% more Medicaid revenue in 21-22 than the average of the 4 previous years. 92% more than the previous year. Part of that was due to COVID the previous year, but still, the numbers speak for themselves. Even though the town retains the Medicaid funding, I have to say that pupil services staff continued diligently to qualify every Medicaid eligible student and submit every eligible service. And their Medicaid claims approval rate was 97.7%, one of the highest we've seen in any district that we've worked with. What that means is that for every claim that is submitted for Medicaid reimbursement, they receive 97.7% approval. And those that come back as either pending or rejected are followed up by the staff and resubmitted if it's appropriate to resubmit. Our conclusion, and quite frankly what we look at, is because Medicaid revenue oftentimes transcends fiscal years, we look at a an average, a 3-year average of your Medicaid revenue, you received an average of approximately $210,500. Your Medicaid eligibility rate is roughly 30%. What that means is that 30% of your special ed students who are receiving related services are Medicaid eligible, which fits with the demographics of the community, which fits with your free and reduced lunch rate population. We correlate that several ways. And we found that based on your eligible services compared to your 3-year average, the difference was $844 from your 3-year average, which means that you're collecting most of what you're eligible to get. Although you're receiving only about $15,000 in your direct service billing, you're capturing the rest of it through your admin claiming and your cost settlement reports. We also look at your IDA grants because, as you know, you can't double dip. You can't get reimbursed for Medicaid if the services are being provided through a federal grant. I'm happy to say that in reviewing your IDA grants, we found that all the funds expended were for students with disabilities. However, we found about $20,000 worth of services that are being expended for contracted services which might be Medicaid eligible. And we are suggesting that since you can't be reimbursed for that, you may want to move that to your general fund and fund something else in your IDEA grant, again, to try to maximize your Medicaid revenue. One of the things we found is that the district struggles to get parental authorizations to allow for Medicaid billing from all the parents. We're suggesting that it become part of the special education intake process. You presume that every parent is Medicaid eligible right at the very beginning of the process. That's probably the best relationship you're going to have with those parents at that time, and ask them to sign the form. The form only needs to be signed one time unless there is a substantial change in the child's IEP. Then you have to go back to the parent and have it re-signed. So that's basically on Medicaid. Any questions?
Any questions, members on Medicaid? Thank you.
Transportation, you currently contract with First Student for your regular transportation. We looked at your cost per day per bus. We looked at the increases over your contract at 2.6% each year. That's considered to be highly advantageous to the district. Your financial management should be commended for having bid and negotiated a highly favorable school transportation contract on behalf of the district. In this time when there's such a shortage of drivers and the economy is going crazy, and you've got a good contract with relatively stable increases from year to year. We looked at your transportation budget as a percentage of your district budget. It's one of the measures one of the metrics we look at, and what we find is that for districts with your similar demographics, if your transportation budget is 7.5% or less than your district budget, you're considered to be highly cost effective. In your case, you're in the 8.34%. We can't say that you're highly cost effective, but part of that is due to the quality of service that you're providing with regard to numbers of stops, walking distances to stops, and things of that nature, and the fact that you have relatively few high school students riding your buses detracts from being highly cost effective. Again, as I said, 7.5% is the benchmark. When you look at the metrics for your AM routes, the real metrics are at the bottom. Your scheduled load capacity ratio is 70%, which means you schedule 70% of your seats on your bus to be used, but your actual load capacity ratio is only 41.4%. So you're actually you actually have fewer than half your students riding your buses. In the afternoon, it's a little higher. But then again, when you look at the various metrics, you look at your route times, your average route time in the afternoon is almost 48 minutes. You have some routes that are bouncing around an hour. Same thing in the morning, you have your average route time at about 40 minutes. You have some routes that are close to an hour. And what's happening is that in order to meet your successive school schedules, you're dropping off early in the morning, and in the afternoon, you have some buses showing up late. But so far, from what we understand, the principals have been able to accommodate that. And so, given the driver shortages nationally, and given the driver shortages that you have locally, the ability to be able to drop off early is significant in being able to provide safe and transportation to and from school. When you look at the various metrics, you can see your tier time is in red, your route time is in blue. You have most of your routes are running well under your tier time. When you look at your load capacity analysis, you're looking at scheduled load, actual load, and bus capacity, and your actual load in red is well below your bus capacity. And again, that is the morning. When you look at the metrics themselves, they come from the metrics chart from before. I won't go through these, but I will say that because of the relatively short tier time in Tier 1, you have students being dropped off up to 30 minutes early at the high school. Something to think about as you move forward. I'm the first one to say you don't change bell schedules for the sake of transportation. Transportation is a support service to the educational process, and we make transportation fit the educational model that you have. But in thinking about changing in bell schedules in the future, you should at least know what the impact is likely to be on transportation. We did the same analysis for the afternoon routes, and again, route time versus tier time, actual load versus bus capacity and scheduled loads. Again, I won't bore you with the findings, but they're in detail in the report. But I will say that you're operating at less than 50% of your capacity on an actual number of students basis. Our conclusions is that we found nothing wrong with the transportation being provided other than the ongoing shortage of drivers at your contractors level. And they were doing everything they could to accommodate that. What that meant was that their office staff were driving, the mechanics were driving when they have absences. Again, we found that because of the low actual ridership, it was our suggestion that we could eliminate at least one bus for the 22-23 school year and still be under 75% of actual load to capacity. The only viable alternative for increasing overall efficiency would be for the district to revise its bell schedules. And again, the caveat is we don't recommend that because transportation is a support program to the educational process. We looked at specialized transportation, and I was very happy with what I saw. You use multi-district routes and schedules and cost sharing with area districts. And inherently, it's less expensive than if each of the districts were to try to independently provide their own special ed transportation solely on their own. We looked at the averages, and we found that the average cost per day for $215 per day for in-district and $185 and change for out-of-district is considered to be relatively cost-effective and efficient. There was a subsequent event because we did our study prior to the start of the school year. The subsequent event was that your 8th grade students would be attending the middle school starting this year, and your business manager wanted to know what that impact would be on our study. And so we recalculated our loading. And as you can see, for the middle school, where you're adding 123 students to that tier, your revised actual capacity went up to 77.8%, which is a good number. Your high school, however, went down to 60.1%. When you took out 123 middle school students, it left only 36 actual high school students riding your high school buses, based on our routing matrix that we had prior to September. I suggested to Justin this evening that if he wants to get an actual head count on his buses, I'll redo this matrix now that the school year has started, and see what he can eliminate in terms of high school tier buses by consolidating some of those, reconsolidating some of those routes. First Planning Solutions, which does your routing and scheduling, they're very good with the technology, and they certainly can look at overscheduling some of your routes, recognizing that many of your students don't actually ride, and adjusting your routes. And again, even with that, it still brings you down to 86% of your seating capacity, and again, that's only 2 students per seat. So once you start getting middle school students at 3 per seat, you're asking for behavioral problems on a bus. More so with the high school students, but certainly with the middle school students also. And again, as I said, first student certainly can overschedule, and we certainly recommend that at the high school level. Typically, we recommend overscheduling by at least 110%, knowing that half the students don't ride, and then readjusting in October 1st when your ridership has settled in and your school year has settled in. The one caution is that the students who actually ride in the fall are not necessarily the same students who ride in the spring, depending on sports and activities and other things. So, but by and large, I would say that your district management, again, should be commended for recognizing that the high school route loads were relatively low to begin with. They knew that going into the study. It was no surprise to them. And they negotiated a single tier price in their current contract for the high school tier, knowing that they could pull that out at any time if the high school routes became undersubscribed and reconsolidated and reconfigured. And so that amounts to a savings of about a little over $10,000 per bus that you can eliminate as a result of your high school reconfiguration. Happy to answer questions.
So I love the idea of reducing by a bus. Having said that, I'm concerned with the ride times, and that's a discussion that we've had on this side of the table more than once. You just said that we have students who are riding 48, maybe 60 minutes, and buses that are arriving late to schools. So eliminating a bus, from what I can see, increases the ride time and increases the tardiness of the bus. Do you have creative solutions?
Marginally, yes, that's true.
Okay.
But if the routes are reconfigured and the students from the bus that's eliminated are spread out over multiple routes, the impact is not on just one route. So the impact becomes perhaps 2 or 3 minute additional average ride time.
For all the rest of our buses.
All the rest of your buses.
Right, and I
correct.
think part of our issue with some of those ride times is that we have students who live on a far end of town, and we may have to drive a long way to pick up 1 or 2 students, which is certainly our responsibility. But I really hate to see little children on a bus for an hour before their day begins.
I agree.
I would look forward to any kind of creative solutions you can offer us. Because, like I said, I love the idea of saving a bus, but I hate the idea of adding even, 3 to 4 minutes
I agree.
onto an already long route. Thank you.
Can I just ask for clarification on that, and this might be for Justin too. Was I reading this right, that you're suggesting eliminating 1 bus on the high school run only?
No, one bus across
One
across
bus
the board.
across the district, okay. Because the high school runs were getting there early,
Mhm.
but the others are now late because of the schedule.
The
Okay.
caveat to that is I would hold off on that recommendation until I see what the actual
Sure.
ridership
Yep.
is on October 1st. October 1st is your data report, all your data to the Department of Ed. You'll be taking a head count anyways on that day, so you don't have to duplicate and do something special for us. We can take that ride count and we can revisit that metric.
We've talked about the bus thing for a long time. I guess my question is, if 36 students, which sounds extremely low, are riding to the school to here, instead of eliminating a bus, why don't we just reconfigure the use of the buses? So if you schedule a couple of buses to come to the high school, you can schedule them a little bit later so they're not getting here early. Then that frees up 4 or 5 other buses that can go start through the elementary runs and the middle school run.
That's correct.
Now you have more buses spread out so that you're not kids aren't gonna be riding as long. That's where I would really like us to look at utilizing that, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, I mean, contractually, we have to pay them a certain amount no matter what, right?
You pay cost per day per bus. So you can.
Per bus or per number of kids on buses?
No,
Just
no, you
per
pay
bus.
cost per day per bus
Per
on your
bus.
contract. So you can eliminate, very clearly in your contract, you can eliminate the high school tier. You can eliminate, probably 8 of those buses and use the others to do your high school route, depending, again, on what the actual count is. When you put them on the map in the computer routing software, you'll see how far apart they are. And if they're at far ends of the town, you may have to run a bus for a relatively small number of high school students. But by and large, you should be able to reduce the number of high school tiers if, in fact,
Right,
the
those
numbers
numbers
is
are low.
36 or relatively low.
Any other questions? Yes, pal?
So it's good that we have like a de-escalation clause, but I know that the buses cost way more than $10,000. So to only get 10,000 is kind of disappointing when I think it's like
Well,
70
it's
something.
it's $56 a day
Yeah.
per bus that you eliminate for just the high school tier.
Yeah,
Don't forget, most of your cost is tied up in the capital cost, the drivers, the overhead, the fuel is tied up in the rest of your transportation.
and we used to, I don't know if it's like this with First Student, but we had like an escalation. So if we wanted to add some more buses back, how much does that cost? Or do we not get that? I'm asking Justin, I'm looking at poor Justin, he probably doesn't know off the top of his head, and it's okay if you don't. We can come back to this another time.
Well,
My only concern is I think it's great to get these marching orders to potentially do this, but winter comes around and all of a sudden kids want to get back on a bus. It's after October. That's usually when kids want to ride, when it's inclement, dangerous weather,
Yep,
and they
yep.
can't walk to school.
Yep.
And I think this is for next year anyways. We're not
and
talking
quite
making
quite
any
frankly,
recommendations.
we never recommend that you get a load capacity ratio, an actual load capacity ratio. 78 to 79% is ideal, because you always want to have some excess capacity to manage the changes that you have between your seasons and between kids who ride in the winter and don't ride in the spring and don't ride in the fall. You want the capacity on that bus to be able to accommodate that. The last thing you want to do is add a bus after the start of the school year, or add a bus even after your budget is set.
Yeah.
That's the last thing you want to do. So you always want to have some amount of excess capacity.
Anything else?
It's not related to fine gentlemen, but are we running our minibus? Does that still work, Justin?
Through the chair,
Sure,
that's,
quickly, yeah.
athletics, sometimes during the day for special education.
I just wanted to make sure it's still operational, that's all.
No, we still use it.
Sorry.
All right, any
Pertinent
final
question.
thoughts, gentlemen?
I would just add one thing.
Yep.
I certainly want to thank the Pupil Services Department and the Business Department for putting up with me for the time that I was here, because we are data hungry. And it's one thing to run the reports, it's another thing to explain to me why you're doing things the way you do them. And I certainly want to thank them, because I would literally hover in front of them to get an answer while
Well, we
we're
got our
here.
money's worth, so thank you. We're thanking you, so thank you very much. Thank you, John and Richard and Michael. We appreciate you coming in tonight. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And through the chair,
Yes.
those
Thank you.
reports that compiled this, when are they coming to us?
Maybe Mrs. Miller can tell us.
Michael, the question was, when we should be expecting.
Oh, within a week or two.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Miller, come on up. Cpac update.
Okay, so we are happy to report that we have a confirmed Cpap Workshop, October 12th, from 6 to 7:30 here in this room. So that's wonderful. We have done a district-wide mailing. Let me see my notes. They're in the little pamphlets are in the buildings. They're on the website. We will do multiple all calls before the meeting. It'll be on the high school sign, so we'll be trying to get as many people. We'll also have for our English language learner families, our bilingual family liaison reaching out and calling them directly to just, try to get them involved and present as well.
Questions? Yes, Mrs. Forbes.
Just curious to know how you're doing on people making up your group. I think you said that you had
So
a
we're
dozen or
at
so
about
families.
20 to 24 parents
Awesome.
that have voiced interest, so
Awesome.
that's what we're.
That's double what we had talked
Yeah.
about, so that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful news. Thank you so much for all your hard efforts to make this happen.
Good.
Thank you. That was easy.
Yippee.
Good luck.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, next on our agenda, we do have some minutes to approve. We have the regular minutes of September 12th, 2022. We do have a field trip request, so let's take the regular minutes first.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from September 12th, 2022.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, is there any discussion? Seeing and hear none, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
I'm a yes, 5 yes. Minutes approved. We also have a out-of-state field trip request for the NJROTC to Rhode Island. It looks like they're going to the Newport Naval Station for basic leadership training. We need a motion to approve this.
I'll make the motion to approve the field trip.
Okay, we have a motion. It looks like everything's been signed off. Do we have a second?
Second that?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Field trip is approved. Next on the agenda, Central Office, School Business Administrator and Director of Operations. Mr. Ledoux.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. The first item I have for you this evening is a draft of our capital plan. We'll be seeking a vote tonight to approve the capital plan to move forward. I'd like to just take it through some of the details. I'm gonna go rather quickly, but please, if there's any questions, please stop me.
Yep.
Now, just a reminder, this capital plan is a dynamic document. We have to reprioritize every year as new things come to light, and with limited resources, some things need to be pushed off. So again, we always have to reprioritize. Just want to highlight some changes from last year. This list has shrunk a little bit. Notably, some of the projects that have been completed and or funded, the columns repaired at the high school. The middle school gym floor has been refinished. We do have a projector ordered for the high school auditorium. However, it's on back order, expecting that in October sometime. And we did receive funding for the siding at the elementary schools, but that project has yet to be determined as to when that will take place. Additionally, there's been a few other requests that have been removed from this list. The first one is fencing at the middle school. At this point in time, we're just not ready to move that forward. Maybe down the road, we might want to revisit putting some fencing in at that building. And also the wood shop safety upgrades have been removed from this. At this time, speaking with the superintendent, we didn't feel as though that was a major priority for the district, as there'd be legacy costs associated with, getting an instructor and offering that program. And certainly, please jump in if there's anything the committee would like to see. This is a draft. We're more than happy to add that back.
So where did that go, though? Is it just off the board altogether?
We just
or is
removed it for the time being from this.
But if this is a plan, are we just talking about FY '24, or are we talking '24 to '29? Like, are we talking a 5 or 6 year
This is
plan?
a 6-year plan.
So does that fall anywhere?
It's been removed from the whole 6-year plan.
That's something that I would like to explore at a different time then, because, we're gonna have to provide different opportunities for kids. I understand at this point, probably not fiscally you know, the right thing to do at this point. We have a lot of building issues, repair issues, but, you know, we've done a great job of bringing in new programming for high school kids, but, you know, woodworking, you know, and that type of thing was something that I just think we should explore it. So thank you that it's off. I'll make a note to talk
Certainly,
about that
again,
in the
this is
future.
for approval by the school committee,
We
so.
could, through the chair, I mean, doesn't necessarily have to be off. It could.
No, I understand. I mean, yeah, I don't want to delay his presentation. I just want to
Fine.
note that I think.
Would this be an appropriate time to just ask for an explanation as to why that was removed?
Sure, I guess that's.
If that's Mike or Justin, but,
Into it a little bit.
yeah.
The initial cost that was received a few years ago just to upgrade the air solution system was about $120,000. And that's before we look at all the equipment that is outdated and have to be replaced. So it's a startup of 120 with equipment then has to be replaced and modernized.
Yep.
And then hiring a full-time staff member as well. So we just felt like at this point with everything else we have going on, that it would be very difficult to add that to this list. But obviously, happy to discuss. We all want more opportunities for our high school kids.
Yep.
We just didn't see where it would fit in with this, with the other priorities we had.
So extremely cost prohibitive.
Correct.
Really,
Correct.
yeah. Which is too bad, but.
It is.
All right, moving along, the first item, the biggest one that we have, which I've been saying has been coming down the pike very quickly, is the roofing. Roofing at the two elementary schools and, I want to say the north side of the high school here, notably the auditorium side of the building. Currently, this request with the revised quotes that we have is for $3.5 million for these roofs. Let me remind everybody, we do have a request into MSBA to pick up a portion of this request. We hope that we will receive some good news sometime in October, but at this point in time, we haven't heard anything yet. We are scheduling meetings to go before Finance Committee, so at this point in time, we're going to move forward the entire request, and maybe things will change by the time next year comes. I'm hopeful that we'll have some new information. Just a quick update, pictures and quotes have been included. That's it. And we can certainly have, you know, if and when it gets to town meeting time, a presentation and things like that to show the condition. Moving along, the next item I have is OMS gym curtain. This is a relatively new item. We're looking at $20,000. This was requested by the principal there. There's currently a partition that's not really sure the material, but it runs on a track, and it's my understanding that it has been working well for some time. Now with the 8th grade moving, that gym class needs to be split, so that often needs to be utilized. We did contact, various vendors and facilities over the years to try to have repairs done to that. And we've been told that needs to be replaced with a curtain. I mean, as you can see, maybe in the high school gymnasium, that there's a curtain that comes down. At this point in time, let me back up a little bit. I would recommend funding this through another source versus going to the Finance Committee. At this point in time, I would only recommend moving forward the roofing project to the Finance Committee. These other things, I think, are not as important. But again, I'll defer to the committee once this is done. The second item we have was a request for classroom furniture at the high school. I know that we've kind of gone back and forth with various needs for classroom furniture. Again, maybe not appropriate to be going before Finance Committee and town meeting for this when this is something that could be fit into an operational budget, maybe purchased at year end, something like that. So I'd recommend that, yes, these are needs. We're not denying that, but you might want to find another funding source, whether it be a grant or anything else. Now, that's for fiscal '24. For fiscal '25, one large item we have is the foundation repairs at the elementary school. I did include the engineering report we just received over the summer. If you remember, we did have $90,000 appropriated. We have an engineering firm come out and dig test pits outside the elementary school, see how deep the foundations were cracked, and figure out the status. They did give us a official quote. They believe it's going to be $562,000 to make these repairs. Again, we know that's a big ticket item. We can't really get a handle on how urgent these repairs are needed. We're told anywhere from a year, so we felt as though maybe we should push this off another year. However, this would go to Finance Committee again, seeking town meeting approval. And perhaps there might be another creative solution to funding this. But we can certainly talk to the finance committee and see maybe, you know, if there's gonna be a borrowing for roofs, might wanna just do it all in one fell swoop, but that's a conversation we can have. The next item we have is the OHS auditorium audio. I did just say, we did order the projector for that. The reason why we are seeking this, so we can have some type of in-house sound system. Often we have a play, any type of event, I don't know if you noticed, but we often rent and have somebody come in. We're looking to eliminate that need and just have our own in-house system. Additionally, if we have rentals or anything like that, you might be able to get more revenue out of these folks by having our own system and not having people rent. That's $25,000, we believe, at this point in time for those upgrades.
So
And again-
would you suggest possibly doing that through another means?
Yes, absolutely, yes. So let me just clarify, the $562,000 for the foundation repairs, I would seek the capital programs through the town. However, the auditorium audio, furniture, and any furniture request, I would recommend finding another source. Certainly something that's doable, like I said, either year end or, you know. The next new item, and let me just back up again one more time. These are new items I'm highlighting. Some of the items are old, but if you see anything on the list you have a question on, please stop me.
Yep.
This new request is for the middle school science lab furniture. These science labs are certainly in need of modernization. The old labs need to have the electrical and plumbing. There's conduits that stick up from where the old Bunsen burners used to come up through the bottom of the lab tables. Those should be removed. I mean, they're all really dated from the late 60s. And the principal there has requested that something be done to address that. Again, that's another one I would kind of chip away at as funding becomes available. Some of those things might be doable within this year to remove the old plumbing, electrical outlets, and things like that. And the final big request we have is to repave the Chaffee parking lot. Now, I believe this has been pushed out to fiscal '29, but we did want to put it on everyone's radar that there's areas where the asphalt is breaking apart in there, so we know that this is going to be coming eventually. Again, this is nothing that's urgent, but we did want to put it on everyone's radar that eventually we're going to have to look at repaving some of these lots for the schools. I know, I believe just recently, we did receive appropriation, some money to do the chip sealing, I believe. So I still have to check and see if that's been done, but.
So the repaving of the Chaffee lot, I see it in FY '29.
Correct.
Oh, all right, you just.
Yeah, I just want to put it on everyone's
Oh, just
radar.
bringing
That's
that
going
up
to be a
as a
need
new-
down the road. It's
okay.
nothing that's urgent. There's just some areas that are breaking apart, and down the road, it's going to be a big ticket item.
Have we looked, oh, yes, Mrs. Swash.
Sorry, Justin, if I can just go back for a quick second to the OMS science labs. I know that when we did the building walkthroughs here, the same situations existed with the old pipes in the floors, that was here as well, wasn't it? Or was that just Middle?
furniture.
They didn't have pipes too?
I think they have pipes too.
That stick up out of the floor?
There may be
The old-
piping here, but it's not necessarily
Same.
the same situation. The middle school, the piping is not connected to anything. It's just sticking up out of the floor. So we feel as though it could be a trip hazard or
Right,
something.
okay.
It should be removed. It really shouldn't be just hanging out there on the floor. Same thing with those old electrical outlets that are sticking up out of
Right.
the floor. And it's underneath all of the science desks.
Right.
So if we're gonna look at replacing that lab furniture, it really, that stuff should be taken out as well.
And the desks are bolted to the ground, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
So the whole entire classroom can't even be reconfigured. The kids have to learn an environment where they're, face forward, 2 by 2. It's not conducive to group work. It's really dated. It's just not an ideal learning environment, in my opinion.
Right, my question was, I only see OMS on here when we know, and we have talked about the situation in the lab classrooms here as well.
It's my understanding some of the built-in cabinets and things like that are being looked at by the custodians currently. So hopefully there's some cheap fixes for this building with the condition of the science labs.
Okay.
That's not necessarily replace all of the furniture, it's more just some repairs.
I feel like it's beyond repair. That's just
I'm kind of on the same.
that's
boat
just
with you.
my opinion, and it's seeing the state of the science labs made me uncomfortable. If I was a student that had to learn in that environment, I would not necessarily have pride for being in that classroom. I would really feel like this is a subpar room to be in. And it's just,
I think too.
we
if
gotta
they-
do something about it,
If
really.
they can fix the superficial things, because I felt that way as a parent when I was here. If we can fix those things with the cabinets and the drawer fronts and all that, it's definitely an improvement. The middle school being more of a safety thing. I just want to be sure that the high school labs stay on that radar too.
We do
Maybe
have a
that'll help.
request for classroom furniture here at the high school that, again, we would recommend that is addressed this year. The amount's for $28,000. I'm just not certain that it includes the actual lab furniture. It was various other furniture in the classrooms, but I don't see why that can't be addressed at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know what furniture is really a priority, like what's really, really needed.
Through the chair.
Yes, go ahead.
In speaking with the high school administrators, the staff teacher chairs are falling apart. That is one of the priorities. The other priority, and there's pictures in your packet as well, is to have some standing desks, 2 in each classroom, for kids to walk over and be able to stand and work. It helps a variety of our different learners, especially kids with ADHD or physical ailments that need to stretch. So that was all part of their package there. But we certainly, as Justin said, could look at what needs to be done still in the science labs. I think a lot of it, I was on that walkthrough as well, there were a lot of peripheral and small cosmetic problems in the science labs, which I know several of our teachers have spent time this summer working in those labs to clean them up and make them look better. And our chemistry lab, we're removing a lot of the chemicals that have been here for a while. But at the junior high, middle school, as you said, it is really, they're stuck in those places and the pipes are still there. They're all sealed and they're safe, but they're left over from many, many years ago. So different challenges in the labs, but both buildings have science lab challenges.
All right, so Justin, you're looking for us tonight to approve FY '24 capital requests. And is it your recommendation for us to approve the 3 roof requests?
Yes, I'm seeking a vote to move the roof request forward to the finance committee. And additionally, if there is any funding available to address these furniture needs at the high school and the curtain need at the middle school.
All right, but somebody's gonna make a motion if the board's in agreement to do the 3 roof repairs, just to move forward to the finance committee.
I would make that motion.
Yes, Mrs. Forbes?
So just a quick question. At our last meeting, we talked about the revolving funds. Is athletics able to absorb that? I know it's not the high school, but it is athletics for students in town. That $20,000 curtain.
For the
can I-
gym curtain,
Yes.
currently, yes, but I would hold off just because it's so early in the year. If there's something else that comes up, I'm just a little hesitant to
Yeah, I just feel like
address that. And
that's a small amount to be putting for capital. We have like the roofs, which are a severe need, and if the furniture is a severe need for students and staff, I feel like that curtain, yes, we need to be able to divide the gym, but is that really a priority? I guess is my only
Well,
question. If
we're
we
not
have
gonna
another-
have those 2 go to capital. Those are gonna stay off and try to get absorbed through the budget.
But I think what you're asking is that we approve all 5 of those items.
No, just 3.
just let me clarify, if I may. We would like to move forward the 3 roofing requests to the finance committee.
Right.
Recommending that the school committee approve the additional 2 items, that if there's funding available this year, that we fund the gym curtain
That we
and any furniture needs, yes.
Okay,
Whether
I'm
it be
sorry.
through revolving, apply for a grant, any type of funding source that we can find to address
Gotcha.
those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And just one more
Yes.
point of clarification. The finance committee does request a 6-year plan. So with respect to any wood shop upgrades, if the committee would like us to put that back, but just maybe a lower priority further out, so it doesn't get lost, that is an option.
Yes, I would like that. FY '28 looks like a small number. For now.
Okay. So we could certainly put that back on.
Yeah, please do, thank you. All right, so I believe I heard was there a motion on the floor? Yes,
I'll
Val
make-
made the motion
I'll make a
to-
motion to forward the capital request for the 3 roofs.
For the 3 roofs, all right, so we
And
have a
for us to
motion.
take the other,
Yes,
2
we have a
projects.
motion to approve the 3 roofs.
I'll
for
second.
Capital request to go to the finance, and a second. Any more discussion? Call for the vote, Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, 5 yes. So the FY '24 capital request to the Finance Committee is approved. Sticking with you still, FY '22.
Thank you.
Balance and revolving accounts, thank you.
So just quickly, I believe there was a discussion at a prior meeting, my apologies, I wasn't here, regarding revolving funds. Just provide a little bit of guidance. I did provide this document from the Division of Local Services that outlines, it's just a quick guide that identifies the law that authorizes the revolving fund, the activity, spending limits, revenue sources, and there's just various additional information. Again, it's just a quick guide if the committee wanted to just take a look to see just basic information, really, about revolving funds.
Through the chair. So I have this. It's a document that I think is readily available for anybody. Is this fund balance report our revolving funds or?
Yes, so the fund balance report is a combination of your grant fund and your revolving funds.
Okay.
So let me just go through that with you quickly. And please, again, stop me, if there's any questions. The fund balance report really identifies the fiscal, the beginning of last year's beginning balance, any revenues that were collected, expenditures that went out, and then the ending fund balance as of June 30. Just a point of clarification here with the grant funds, this is what cash we have on hand. So this is not the amount that's available in the grant. What happens is the cash has to be requested on a monthly basis. So when you see the ending fund balance in these grant funds, that's not how much you have left in the grant. I'm gonna jump ahead just a little bit. In the budget to actual reports, you're gonna see prior year grants. That's how much is actually available in the grant. When you see the allocated amount, that's what's left in the grants. This is for cash. But this is important when you talk about revolving funds, because you can see how much cash is left in those revolving funds. That is really cash on hand that you have to work with. Just want to speak to a little bit the balances that are in here. As you very well know, fiscal 20 and fiscal 21, we didn't quite offer all of the services that we would in a normal school year. So some of these revolving funds have had substantial balances. We have, I'd like to say pretty aggressively, spent some of that funding to take care of some of the capital needs that we've had. Notably, we did the scoreboard last year, the LED sign. But I just wanted to comment on that because it's not necessarily that you're charging too much per se for a certain activity, but there was some money that was in those accounts that needed to be spent down. And just a good example of that, if you look at the athletic revolving funds, the expenditures far exceed what your revenues were that were coming in. So what that means is we're spending that down, but we're certainly not taking in that much money. But I just want to be very clear about that. And there are some balances that are available but again, it has to be specific to that program. So to Mrs. Forbes' point earlier, athletic fees, you have $52,000 in there. And you could certainly use that for the curtain. Just to move forward, I would just recommend trying to spend some of these down and then taking care of some of these capital projects. So when we talk about classroom furniture and stuff like that, I would certainly try to shift some of your resources to make things so you have areas that are appropriate. What I mean by that is if you have athletic money, you might want to take athletic items that are needed in your general fund, use your revolving fund to pay for those, freeing up your general fund money. That then would allow you to really not just take care of projects that are only related to athletics. You could really use it for anything you wanted to. But it's just really shifting the resources between your revolving funds and your general fund to take care of the needs of the district, really. One other thing I just wanted to comment on was part of this capital plan, you may notice there's no school lunch items. We believe that the needs of the school lunch, as well as the balance that we have in that fund, warrants really its own spending plan, really its own capital plan. So I did speak with the food service director this morning, and at some point she will be providing an update on how she's going to spend down that funding. We've been slowly chipping away at it. We replaced a few various things last year. But again, there's a balance of, let's see, $457,000,
Thank you for that.
which is
federal
pretty good.
government.
Now, that is, a couple things have happened. The first being well, it might be a matter of opinion. The quality of food has certainly improved, increasing participation. The second thing that has happened is universal free lunch.
Yeah.
So when it's free and kids like it, the participation's gonna go up. So we received quite a bit of reimbursement, again, to the tune of $450,000. But that funding has to be spent on school lunch-specific items. So again, I would anticipate she's going to come forward with its own separate plan for food service.
So, go ahead. Okay. So, through the chair, I know we talked on our tours about dishwashers and things like that, that we just don't have in our food service program, and we use other methods of serving the food, like disposable trays and things like that. But I'm sure that's gonna come in the presentation. But I'm eager to know, like, what would make us better and stronger and improve the quality. And I know we have an excellent food service director now, which is a huge blessing, but yeah. Just,
I
that
did want to know,
plan's
you
huge.
certainly have the resources to address these needs.
Yeah,
That was exactly what I was gonna ask about, was the dishwashers. I think that's important. I'm sure Viana's on board with that as well. Yep, that was it for me.
That's all I have regarding the fund balance report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from any members?
just gratitude. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. I think it's important for all of us to be aware of all of our resources and really have a pulse on things at times. So thank you.
Is that it for
Thanks,
you?
Jeff.
I have one more item.
Yep.
Lastly, I have the budget to actual report. That's through August. Now, just as a reminder, not much activity has happened through the month of August, as you know, the staff hadn't come back yet, so you don't really see salaries. But you do have that. Back to kind of what I was saying earlier, you do have the fiscal 22 grant balances. That's the allocated column for the prior year grants. At this point in time, in August, the fiscal 23 grants haven't been approved yet. So there are some substantial balances in the prior year grants. But again, at this point in time, through August, the fiscal 23 grants had not been approved yet, so I didn't want to bring forward something that hadn't been approved by the state.
Dave, through you,
Yeah.
actually to our superintendent, do we have a presentation for our grants and how we're spending our money and what we've put forth as our plan of action for the grants? I'm just kind of wondering, like,
I don't have one right now as of this time.
no, I know, but I mean, can we have a presentation? And that might be in the calendar. Helen, I apologize. I know that we do have an approved calendar for the year.
There is nothing for grant presentation.
Grants.
So I'd like to make that request if I may.
If I may, through the
Yeah, go ahead.
budget process, we normally have what we think we're going to receive for grants and a loose spending plan, but that's not what actually happens come the end of the summer when the grant allocations are released. So, again, I think what you're looking for is a little bit more detail on
Yes,
what the actual is going to be. So,
yeah, and then what the plan is for those grants. It would be great to hear all the great.
and just to kind of jump forward like I always do, again, this is through August, but I just want to make the committee aware of some things that have happened, transpired throughout the summer, and things on the horizon. The very first one I have is sped legal costs are expected to exceed the budget. There's only about $10,000 in sped legal cost.
What page is that on, please? Is it in this report, or are you just reading off it?
I'm gonna see if it's captured in this report. Probably about the, just a quick guess, 15th line down on the second page of your budget to actual report. You can see legal services
Yeah.
for sped.
Yeah.
You can see there's $10,000 allocated. At this point in time in August, $5,300 was spent, and then another purchase order was issued for $4,600. That leaves nothing. There's nothing left in that. So
So from July to the end of August, we've gone through $10,000?
that's correct.
Wow. And what is that, and our legal services below that, is that up to date?
Yes, that's your general legal services. That, you have $30,000 encumbered. You've only actually spent about $800 in regular, I'll call it regular ed, but it's not, just general legal services.
Right. So what would you recommend for the legal services, special education?
You might have to take from the regular, the general legal, and just move it to the other line. That's what I would recommend, just put a little bit more of a cushion in there.
So, I mean, if we've already encumbered 100% of our budget, and we weren't even into the school year yet, what are we supposed to do?
That's
What
why
do you
it's
recommend we
concerning.
put- Yeah, very concerning.
Well,
Can you elaborate as to why?
no, to be honest with you, I don't
Okay.
know the specifics of it. I just get the financial report and said, geez, I think that's getting spent a little quickly.
I would agree.
Have to shift resources, really.
Okay.
It might be one of those things, it's kind of a shame, but I mean, you have money in the grant, you have sped grants, and I'm sure you may be able to use for legal services that, to be honest, is not earmarked for anything right now. That's one potential solution, or to shift maybe some of your out-of districts to that grant to free up money in your general fund to cover the legal services.
So do we have any cases pending do we have anything filed? I mean, that's just an awful lot of money for just consults with a lawyer.
Through the chair.
Yes,
So,
Mr.
yeah, we
Superintendent.
have had some very complex cases since June that we have had to work through over the summer and are currently working through right now to explain those costs.
Okay.
Yeah, my apologies, I don't have much detail.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
I,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, no, I just didn't know. So what would you recommend, Mr. Lucas, that we earmark to make sure that we have some funding in there? Because, I mean, we're gonna go a whole year with zero money left in that account, essentially.
We don't anticipate that it will continue at this rate, but we also feel like, as Mr. Ledoux mentioned, that we do have some in our general lawyer funds that we should be able to slide over.
Yeah.
I know our lawyer fees were very expensive this past year. Me being a new superintendent, we had multiple negotiations going on that we needed his counsel for. So we don't anticipate any negotiations this year coming up, so we're hoping that we'll have some extra money in that account for that we can slide over to special ed.
Shift over, okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Burke?
Just to clarify that, Mike or Justin, the current ongoing negotiations, those legal fees are all under FY '22? Or we,
No, this is as of August.
right,
So some of those that we've encumbered will be added to the next report.
so we will expect to see that
Some of
number
that will be reduced, yes, correct, you are correct.
go up.
Just a few more,
Yeah,
just
please.
updates, just to bring everybody up to speed. Let's see, there was, math consultant was hired at the middle and high school. We expect this throughout the year to be about $20,000. We have absorbed that in the regular, general budget, however, you just won't see that reflected in this document. We did have a vocational student graduate. That freed up a little bit of money in her transportation. That transportation has been moved to homeless transportation. As, if you remember during the budget process, we had limited funding in homeless transportation, about $5,000, maybe 10 total between homeless in-district, homeless out-of-district, and foster. So I have shifted that $30,000 to fund the homeless transportation. And lastly, the Chromebooks. We had purchased Chromebooks at the end of last fiscal year with year-end money. That freed up resources for this fiscal year, so we did purchase Unified Insights. I want to say that was about $17,000. So just to let the committee know, that is coming. So if you see the hardware lines really wiped out, that was all shifted to software as those Chromebooks were purchased last year.
Is that the Power School?
Yes. Yes.
I feel like there was a big, if I may, through the
Yes.
chair, item for PCs too. Was I wrong?
Recently, that was, my understanding with the moving of the 8th grade, there was a computer lab that was needed, additional computers were needed for the lab. So Ms. Belhume has actually picked that up with her donation account. Her donation fund, I want to say it was to the tune of $40,000 at the beginning of the year, but she did pick up the cost of that, it was $15,000 for that computer lab.
It's a great use of those funds.
All right, anything else, Mr. Ledoux?
That's all I have, if anybody,
All right, any other questions, members? All right, thank you, sir.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
All right, Superintendent, personnel update.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to welcome several of our new employees. Pamela Martin and Maribel Vega Munoz are our new Educare aides, district-wide. Jillian Miller is our new math interventionist at the middle school. Mary Sarachik is our new Bright Room Academic Coordinator at the middle school. And Pam Baggio is our Bright Room Academic Coordinator for the high school. So we'd like to welcome them all on board and good to have them on our team.
All right, thank you. Your goals.
Goals. So there's a draft of my goals in your packet. It has 4 goals currently for this draft. Student learning goal, professional practice goal, and then 2 district improvement goals. And I'll go through them briefly. Please stop me if you have any questions or concerns. The first one is building a highly effective leadership team together. We've hired 2 new principals, and we have a new central office team as well. Throughout the year to continue to grow our capacity to impact our students, our families, and our staff. Based on DESE expectations, where again, it's a best practice to do learning walks together with central office and our principals and assistant principals as teams to strengthen and synthesize our observation skills. This year, we're going to focus on qualities consistent with universal design for learning and standard-based grade level content. We read together this summer UDL Now by Katie Novak, which was terrific, led us to a lot of good days of discussion on what we want to see in our classrooms and for our students. All administrators will pursue SMART goals for the year, Smarty goals, again, this year. That include progress and outcome benchmarks, and I'll mentor and support the 2 new building principals we hired in the past year. So that is our first goal. Yes?
Just ask for clarification.
Yep.
Mike.
Yes.
Do our new principals receive mentoring outside of,
No, not
Building?
necessarily.
No. not
as
that
you
I
know-
don't think you're a good mentor?
No, that's okay.
curious about the
Not taken
process.
personally, as a principal for 12 years, but I don't know everything. But no, if we need to do that, we could do that, but
I'm just curious.
right now,
Yeah.
I think they're in good shape.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
The second,
Go
oh,
to.
sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, go to.
Good.
Yep.
The second goal is professional practice goals. Again, year 2 of our new superintendent induction program. There'll be a focus this year on completion of the district improvement plan. The school committee and all the stakeholders will have an understanding of the educational direction and focus of the district for the next 3 years. We start work on that in December. We're gonna have to send out some surveys this fall, try to get input from families. The committee that we set up for that will have parents and students also invited to it, as well as some staff and school committee members. So it really has every chance to give everybody a voice in what our district improvement plan will be going forward for the next 3 years for the district.
Questions?
Next goal, number 3, is a district improvement goal, which coincides well. I know we're reviewing the school committee goals later. School committee goal number 2, and our school improvement plans as well. We tried to align everything this year. Utilizing data to inform instruction. We've had a lot of discussions, this group and our data and accountability group, about what we want to do for our classrooms and our students. And you can see the key actions there. We want to support teachers in this work this year. Ensure that every school participates in grade level or department data meetings and track student data. We're going to utilize our coaches and interventionists to support teachers in analyzing data to create appropriate intervention groups and inform their instruction. Provide professional development for faculty. Implement and train caregivers and staff with the new Power School add-on for assessments called Unified Insights that we just discussed, which will be our warehouse, will be the data warehouse for all of our stuff for our staff and our families, which will be terrific. Engage families in communication about data when it's released at least 3 times a year, and then perform item analysis and MCAS results for grades 3 through 8 and 10, and connect those standards review with our curriculum mapping. especially at the high school level as well. And that's our kind of our main data goal, which I hope you see reflects your school committee goal as well.
Questions? All right, last one.
All right, goal number 4 is another district improvement goal, which coincides, I think, very well with the school committee goal number 4 about equity. And it also coincides with our school improvement plans as well, and that's inclusive practices. And we want to build and broaden the use by our staff of inclusive instructional strategies and increase their awareness and understanding of the role of social emotional learning in the classroom in order to create a school community where all students have a sense of belonging and can access rigorous grade level standards. We want to build our K-12 continuum of linked SEL strategies and behavioral supports with the multi-tiered system of supports, the MTSS grant that was mentioned earlier tonight with our consultants provided by DESE. We want to continue our social emotional benchmark surveys that we did last year for the first time, and our Bright Classroom supports for those students who need transitions back to school. Based on the findings in the future report, there are several findings tonight that we had good discussion about. One of them will be to ensure that our students are on schedule to graduate, whether they're special ed or regular ed, and work with the high school staff to do that. Our high school administrative team has already started meeting with those families and students where there's concern if they'll graduate on time, which is terrific. Continue to work with the administration to improve the culture and environment for the high school so that all students can be successful there and feel like they belong. And continue to provide professional development for staff on bullying, IEPs, 504s, trauma, and mental health issues that come up in our district. And I know last year we made a big push to make sure that the district communications were updated for families of our EL students in multiple formats and are accessible for various family. Home language will continue to focus and do that and carry through with that. And that's the 4th goal.
Questions from the committee? If not, we do need to approve Mike's goals, so we do need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the superintendent's goals.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any more discussion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Cook? Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Ms. Griffin?
Yes.
Burke?
Yes.
I'm a yes, 5 yes.
Thank you.
Goals pass. Okay, on to our school committee. We need to vote on our goals. So pleasure of the board, do we want to go through each goal? Or I guess for the television audience, I could have each of my colleagues just read one of the goals, and if we have any further discussion on each, we could go from there. So, Mr. Burke, if you want to do goal 1, Mrs. Griffin, goal 2, Mrs. Forbes, goal 3.
Just one quick question.
Yes.
We have 2 copies here in front of us. One with the highlighted yellow changes. I just want to be sure I'm reading from the correct one.
Yeah, so I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong.
Shows the changes.
Yeah,
They're
this shows the changes.
Okay, so this is our, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Burke, want to start with goal 1?
Sure. So goal number 1 is strengthen communication and collaboration. Create vehicles to strengthen the communication and collaboration with the district leadership team, parents, town committees, students, and the citizens of Oxford as measured by feedback provided to the school committee and increased attendance at both special workshop meetings and regular school committee meetings. Action step number 1 is to collaborate with the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and Town Manager in connection with capital budget requests, FY23 budget, and continued building of partnerships. You want me to read across?
I would just do the 4.
Just the action
Just do the
steps?
action steps, and then if any members have specific questions or concerns.
Action step number 2 would be to engage parents and community members in the workings of the school committee. And action step number 3 would be to improve the perception of the school committee by the community of Oxford that as a committee we work collaboratively together and not against each other or the school department.
Mr. Burke, are there any questions? I know we've had time to review these, we discussed them. Or anything in the, how we're gonna measure it, or any parts of this that people have concerns with? Goal 1. All right, goal 2, Mrs. Griffin.
Goal 2, assessment, academic, social, emotional, and behavior. The school committee will ensure that data is used to effectively support student growth and achievement. Measurable objectives, identify data sources needed to successfully monitor student achievement, receive regular updates on student achievement using identified data, support professional development opportunities focused on using data to improve teaching and learning, and monitor the district growth plan to ensure progress in using data to inform instruction. Action step 1. The school committee will identify the source of data to use in order to monitor growth and achievement academically, social, emotionally, and behaviorally. Action step 2. The committee will identify a regular schedule of meetings to receive updated achievement data. Action step 3. The school committee will receive an update on the district's progress of using data to more effectively inform instructional improvements. My papers are stuck together, bear with me. And action step 4, the school committee will receive updates on PD that targets the use of data to inform instruction.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions or comments? Goal 2. All right, goal 3, Mrs. Forbes.
Goal 3 is safety. The school committee will ensure a safe environment for all district students and employees. Measurable objectives. Adequate funding to support district's share of the school resource officer position in the budget. Achieve safety initiatives proposed by the superintendent and his leadership team. And engage the community in safety initiatives through parent information sessions, media, etc. Action step 1. The school committee will identify a regular schedule of committee meetings to receive safety updates. Action step 2. The school committee will support and promote safety initiatives through forums and in the media. Action step 3. The committee will review and provide feedback on proposed upgrades to existing security protocols and equipment. Action step 4. The school committee will work with the Oxford Police Department to increase the school resource officer position.
Thank you, Mrs. Forbes. Any questions or comments for goal 3? All right, Ms. Cook, goal 4.
Sorry. Equity, the school committee will engage the school community in a reflective, ongoing process to ensure equity for all students. Measurable objectives, ensure that the district continues to offer or sponsor professional development on issues of equity. Implement an equity action plan to review the curriculum and instructional resources and engage in equity-focused reading and discussion. Action step 1, the school committee will receive regular updates on progress made by the district-wide equity committee. Action step 2, the school committee will ensure that the district continues to offer or sponsor professional development on the issues of equity. Action step 3, the committee will support the review of curriculum and instructional resources under an equity lens. Number 4, the district will make gains in access and equity for all students.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Any questions or concerns on goal 4? If not, we do need a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve the goals.
We have a second.
I'll second.
All right, before we call for the vote, I just want to thank you all for, this is really, these goals are well done, and I want to thank you. I think Pal's the one who kind of drove us to move forward in this, and I appreciate it, because
I
this
appreciate
is
you
really
guys being
well, laid out well, and with Corey's support too from Millbury, so thank you. A lot of assists here, so. Call for the vote, Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Burke?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. 5 yes, our goals pass. On to subcommittee reports. I know Pal and the policy committee and I here have quite a few, so I'm just gonna turn it over to the Madam Chair. Mrs. Griffin.
Well, we do have an
Good luck.
extensive, we have an extensive amount of paperwork for you folks this evening. And I don't know, I'll ask the chair.
I would say just take it one at a time.
Okay, and I
So
don't
let's
know,
do one, and if we have to vote on,
I don't know if we're
we'd
gonna
have to
waive.
waive, right, depending on it, we can waive it, so why don't you just talk about each and,
So DKC expense and travel reimbursement, we did change our language in this policy based on recommendation from council. So that is why there's that update there.
That was gonna be my question, so thanks for answering.
You're
Are
welcome.
we taking them one at a time? So we're gonna.
yeah, so we can, if somebody
Make a
wants
motion to waive the second reading of DKC and approve policy as it's written.
I second that.
So we have a motion and a second, any discussion? Can we take the vote without reading the whole policy, okay? Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Burke?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, DKC approved.
All right, and we have another policy here, AC, non-discrimination. And I believe this was an update that came to us through MASC. And we have this new language for you folks this evening.
So I will make a motion to approve, to waive the second reading and approve policy AC, non-discrimination.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call for the vote. Ms. Cook? Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, 5 yes. AC passes.
Alright, and this is another new policy that came to us that was recommended. It's AC-R, non-discrimination, including harassment and retaliation.
I'll make a motion to waive the second reading and approve policy AC-R.
I
Motion.
Second that.
Sorry, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Ms. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, AC-R passes.
And this is policy ACA, harassment prevention policy, and this is an update based on MASC and some own language as well, I think, that we discussed with council.
So I'll make a motion to approve, or waive the second reading of policy ACA and approve it tonight.
I second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. Ms. Cook? Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. ACA passes.
And this is another policy this evening, ACAB, sexual harassment prevention policy. And again, this was an update from MASC.
And it was aligning, we had the wrong.
We had some wrong letters up there.
Wrong letters
And we have fixed it.
and all fixed.
God bless everybody on that subcommittee. It was-
I will make a motion to waive the second reading and approve policy ACAB.
I second that.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? Yes, Mrs.
I just have a quick question to the people on the committee.
Yeah.
Under the definitions of sexual harassment, I just would like an explanation of the word visual, second line of the first paragraph there.
This again came to us through
Yeah.
other resources, so
So
I,
we don't have it.
I guess you could think about what type of harassment could be visual.
Well, that's where I'm having a hard time.
I would assume, sorry.
Picture.
I would
Is that
imagine,
the way you perceive that I'm looking at you?
Or
I-
maybe
I would assume
like
it
something
refers to
media?
pictures being shared
Media?
via social media.
Oh, okay.
I don't
Because
know.
it is addressed as media and photos and all that in
I
other
think there's-
policies?
Well,
So I
just-
was just,
I did a quick Google search. Visual harassment is a situation where the individual exposes themselves to another person without the victim's consent, and the act affects their work performance or attitude. Examples of visual harassment include exposing of private parts, sending sexual images or videos to another person.
okay, I didn't think about that. Thank you
No.
for the clarification.
Any more discussion? Call for the vote. Ms. Cook? Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
I'm a yes. ACAB passes.
And this is policy ACB, non-discrimination on the basis of sex. And again, this came to us through MASC.
I will make a motion to waive the second reading and approve policy ACB.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call for the vote. Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. 5 yes. ACB passes.
All right, then we have policy ACC, Title IX, Policy and Procedures. And this is new.
Can I just ask a question, Dave?
Yes.
So being new, I mean, we did not have Title IX policy and
think we
procedures in
did.
our,
Have something, but again, this came to us through MASC as updated. And again, I think a lot of things have been changing recently with procedures, so this is hot off the presses,
Sure.
what we should be doing, and I think things are evolving and changing every day, to be quite honest with you, so.
absolutely, I understand that.
this is the
Is
most-
there something we need to remove, or is this just
This is what we need to
replacing
have.
one we didn't have?
I think it was
We did-
embedded in a policy, but it
Okay.
didn't
Right.
go to the scope that they're looking for now.
Okay.
And we're, taking out things that are not up to date and
Sure.
making sure that we have what's right.
No, you're doing a great job here. I'll make a motion to waive the second reading and approve policy ACC.
I Second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion or any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, call for the vote. Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. ACC passes.
And we have ACE, non-discrimination on the basis of disability, and this is new.
And I would make a motion to waive the second reading and approve policy ACE.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, call for the vote. Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
I'm a yes, 5 yes. ACE passes.
And I think these are just, right here, a list of our old policy here that we struck, JICFB, bullying. And our updated policy is attached to that, JICFB, so you can see all the changes. And again, this is, so we are in line with the new changes made by the state and federal level.
So I'll make a motion to waive the second reading and approve policy JICFB.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Call for the vote. Ms. Cook? Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
I'm a yes. JICFB revisions passed. And finally,
JICA student dress code. And I think this was just after we spoke about it at great length as a committee, that we're finally.
And I would make a motion to waive the second reading and approve policy JICA.
I second that.
we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call for the vote. Ms. Cook? Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
I'm a yes, 5 yes. JICA passes. Thank you very much, Mrs. Griffin.
Well, I thank you too, because you're working right beside me,
Yeah,
and- and all the people on the committee, and Mr. Lucas
Yes.
especially, because he's been our fearless note taker.
Yeah.
And then Helen, who does
Thank
it
you.
again. She
She
transcribes it and updates that policy handbook, I think almost instantaneously, it feels like,
Yeah.
at times,
It's
so.
really efficient, so thank you. Diversity, equity, inclusion, Mrs. Forbes and Ms. Cook.
So we had our first meeting on the 13th, which we've switched now. We're Tuesday afternoons at 4:30 instead of Wednesday evenings. We had a fairly small group. We didn't have any new members present at that meeting. So the idea and the agenda essentially was, what did we do last year that we liked? How do we want to move forward, and what are our goals? So the group's pleasure, they really appreciate having the guest speakers come in, because it really gives us the perspective from whoever that individual is and their experience here in our school system and or in their own life. We are definitely looking for additional members. We have identified a couple of groups that were not on our radar last year, foster and adoptive families and the challenges that they face, and other groups that we've identified. So we are working toward getting some guest speakers. Sorry, I am working towards getting some guest speakers. And I did actually go to the Chaffee open house and passed out flyers looking for, and I don't think Helen's been inundated with requests. I asked Mrs. Griffin, she has not received any, and neither have I. So that's where we stand.
Thank you.
But,
We can just keep trying, just keep offering. right?
Absolutely, yeah. And we're
But
looking
great
forward to
work.
having someone from the Cpac join us as well.
Yeah,
I think
great.
that's an important group.
Great
so.
work. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Personnel and negotiations.
Negotiations are ongoing with the OEA.
Thank you. School buildings and safety, there's no updates from me and Ms. Cook. I don't know if there's anything on your end, Mr. Lucas, if we missed anything.
I know the Oxford Police Department made a presentation today to our middle school staff, and they did an ALICE training today after school, and all reports are it went well. We're starting to do that, as we mentioned earlier, I think in the fall, in late September, early October, Oxford Police Department's willing to work and kind of update us on ALICE 2.0 for all our staff. We did have an administrator training this summer, the same day we did a bullying training. Went really well, and they're gonna share that with all our staff. Then we'll have, every school will have one ALICE training event later with students. This is just with staff.
Just training. So OMS is the only one so far?
So far,
or-
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then-
They're making a presentation to staff to update them, and then doing some sort of drill with the staff after.
All right, excellent.
Have a follow-up too?
Yes.
Please. Mike, is there any discussion about a parent night regarding ALICE?
We have not discussed that, but we could do something around that.
Something maybe talk with
I
the
know you-
resource officer about?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that's
Great
happened here in the
suggestion.
past too, right? Probably pre-COVID.
Yeah, especially when we first rolled it out, but I
Sure.
think with the 2.0 version of it, it might have some,
In a lot of new
Sure.
families.
yeah. and
Yeah, we can do
Since the
that.
last time
Sure.
it was
Yeah,
done.
it's been, yeah, it's a great,
Absolutely.
great point. District accountability and curriculum,
I think our next meeting's November 7th.
November 7th, yeah.
okay. All right, look forward to that. We do have a warrant report, Ms. Griffin.
So I have a warrant report for this evening, September 26, 2022. I signed a payroll warrant on September 15th, 2022 for $668,511.38. An accounts payable warrant for September 20th, 2022 for $64,212.23. And an accounts payable warrant for September 27th, 2022 for $110,702.28. That is all.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Griffin. Members forum, Ms. Cook.
I just wanted to thank, you're not here anymore, but the people from the futures education and their presentation, that was very informative, and I'm glad. I was going to ask the question, but Pal kind of asked it for me, that if they were going to guide us in the right direction when they present us with room for opportunity, so I appreciate that. And then Mr. Ledoux, thank you for everything. I know you're leaving us soon, so I appreciate all of your reports and everything, and that's it.
Thank you. Mrs. Forbes.
So first I'd like to comment on a great homecoming, now almost 2 weeks ago. Really great, beautiful day weather-wise, really well attended. Most of our teams were really successful, which is a great day. I want to say congratulations to our football team, current record 3-0, and apparently pulled out a crazy win on Saturday afternoon. Thank you. I wasn't able to go to the game. I want to thank the policy committee, because you did a whole lot more work than the DEI committee did this month. So that's wonderful. Thank you. And that's it for me.
Mrs. Griffin.
Well, I want to thank the policy subcommittee too, because they're amazing, and we're blessed to have them. And there's more policies coming, and I think it's all fiscal stuff. Helen said the update. And I want to thank all of you for your patience with me in regards to our school committee goals. I know that I'm always a little bit intense. I have such a strong vision for, like you all do, for this district, and I think we are making amazing strides, and it was great. The presentation tonight was extremely informative. I really appreciated Justin doing all that extra homework for us and giving us those revolving funds. You know I make a lot of requests of everybody a lot, pretty consistently. I'm always trying to do my homework, and it's a lot. And I do thank your patience with me, all of you, as committee members. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Good thing.
Mr. Burke.
I think after hearing that report tonight, I think we need to congratulate our staff on the work they're doing to make sure that our students are included. I think with the findings, we have to congratulate Mike and Kristen, Tara, and Justin on the fact that almost everything they said was an area of need was something that we're already working on before they even finished their review. So it's great to see that we are on top of these things, and I look forward to see what their recommendations are in the plan going forward. But
Yeah.
that was good.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. I would echo the same to what Corey just said. Great job to the staff, and we have a lot of great things going on, but now we have the capacity to build off of that and move forward, which I think is great, and some of the other comments. One thing I do want to just mention publicly is I'm just proud to be a member of this board. Sometimes we don't see eye to eye, but I think overall, we always have what's in the best interest of the students and the families and the staff in mind, even though we might not always agree. I have watched other board meetings in town, and I don't see that same collegiality in the ability for people to speak and be heard, whether it's public or board. So I just really appreciate this board, and I want to thank you all for that. Second thing, we do only have one meeting in October, but I have, which is the 24th, but I have scheduled Tracy Novick to come in on the 17th at 5:30. So it's the Monday before that, just to give us a budget presentation. Budget overview will be about an hour. Hoping at that point to potentially have a new business manager at that time as well.
What time, I'm sorry?
It would, at 5:30,
What
We
day
have a
again?
conflict.
17th.
Mike, Corey and I have a meeting at 4:30.
Oh, is that a negotiation?
It is. So that's conflict for three of us.
I mean, I could push it to 6, I could have her come half hour
I
later.
think we're scheduled, is that 4 to 7 if I'm not mistaken?
That's the
Is
same
that on
thing.
October 17th?
Isn't that what we decided? Oh, I have it on.
I have
seven-
October 19th for
That's
that.
what I have as well. I have the 19th.
Oh, okay, I have it on both, I'm sorry.
That's okay, we'd rather shake that out
I think that was
now.
our backup date, September.
Okay, thank you.
But,
So October 17th still works, is, 5:30, it'd just be a 5:30, real, less than an hour, that will be the only thing on the agenda. Gives us an opportunity to hear from MASC, budget, give us, chance to ask questions. And, like I said, a potential new business manager on at that board, I think it's just a good time for it. So just wanted to put that on everybody's radar. I do need to open the floor for public comment. Do not see anybody else for public comment, so we will close it. Do I read? I forget. Do I read executive session first? Okay, sorry. Pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, subsection 21A3, the committee will enter executive session to discuss strategy with respect of collective bargaining with the Oxford Education Association and MGLC 30A S21A, subsection 2, to discuss strategy and preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and/or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, school business administrator and director of operations, as is necessary to protect the position of the public body. The committee will exit executive session and adjourn the public meeting without conducting any further business. We do need a motion to go into executive session.
Make a motion to go into executive session.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. Any discussion? Call for the vote. Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
I'm a yes, 5 yes. We are now in executive session.